All right, so we are the Indiana County Sustainable Economic Development Task Force. My name is Molly Sarver. I am the Senior Land Use Planner at the Indiana County Office of Planning and Development. I act as the Sustainability Coordinator to the task force. We began the task force in 2017. At the time, the commissioners who started the task force were Michael Baker, Rod Ruddick, and Shreen Hess. This task force was formed in partnership with between Evergreen Conservancy, the Center for Community Growth, and the League of Women Voters. In September of 2017, the task force began working on developing a report that would identify opportunities for sustainable development in Indiana County. This report was developed by engaging the community in different ways, having meetings where people could share their concerns or their ideas. And throughout this process, they identified 4 sectors of interest: sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, building construction materials, and environmental restoration and stewardship. Within each of these 4 focuses, they wanted to identify opportunities for economic development, workforce development, and citizen education. In addition to the recommendations that they identified, which aligned under the 4 focuses, they identified 5 executive recommendations, those being to develop a new mission now that they had their report, which was part of their initial mission. They wanted to continue acting on these recommendations that they had come up with. They wanted to develop an Office of Sustainability. We currently do not have an Office of Sustainability, but we do have myself, who is a paid staff person dedicated to the task force. They also want to continue having annual sustainability summits. We've had an annual sustainability summit every year since 2017, except for 2020. This is our 4th summit. And usually those take place in person and they're held on one day, but this year we are doing a webinar series in its place. They also wanted to incorporate the sustainability report and sustainability initiatives into the long-range plans that we had at the county level. And they also wanted to work on expanding broadband access across the county. In September of 2018, they released the finalized report, and it was approved of by the county commissioners. In 2017, we held another sustainability summit, and you can access videos from that presentation by going to sustainableindianacounty.org by clicking events and then going to the previous summit events page. There you can find our PowerPoint presentations that were given by the panelists that year, as well as recordings of their presentation. You can also access the recordings from the presentations from this summit at our Sustainable Indiana County page. And you can also find out more about our organization by visiting our page. If you want to contact us directly, you can email sustainableindianacounty@gmail.com or by contacting me at the information provided. And without further ado, I would like to take the time to have the panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with Henry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Henry McKay. I am the Pennsylvania Program Director of a nonprofit organization called Solar United Neighbors. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And I am based here in Pittsburgh. And we've previously run now two solar co-ops in Indiana County over the past couple of years, and helped a number of people in the area go solar, including my 3 fellow co-panelists here.
Okay, Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Rogers. I'm the president of Evergreen Conservancy. I'm also one of the founding members of the Sustainable Indiana County Task Force, and I was the facilitator for the Environmental Restoration and Stewardship Group. I'm also the League of Women Voters Environmental Committee, which looks at air quality, water quality, other issues in the environmental aspects.
All right, Hank.
Hi, I'm Hank Nur, White Township, and I'm retired from IUP as of about 4 years ago. I was very involved in the community and the arts and different things, and stay committed to the community. And I joined the co-op as an observatory member. I was not able to get involved in the process due to other commitments, but we've been solar now, and you can kind of see behind me in the yard is our array back there behind the dead satellite dish. And we've been solar since June of 2019.
Jim.
Yeah, I'm Jim LaFontaine, and I'm a member of the Indiana County Solar Co-op, and my array went in about June of 2019. Because I live on a farm and I have a lot of space, and because I'm in an all-electric home that uses a lot of electricity, I was able to put in a larger than typical homeowner array. I also come from a background of burning coal to make electricity. So I have a particular interest in wanting to be responsible and take the load off of generating CO2.
All right, thank you. So we will begin to, we'll go into our question segment now. Let me pull up. All right, so to start with our first question. Oh, here, give me a few seconds, everyone. It actually may be easier if I do it this way. Are you still able to see the presentation?
Yeah, but hold the control key and hit F5. Or go to from current slide, that little icon. So you get in a slideshow.
All right.
There you go.
All right, so with our first question, we'll start with Jim. Why did you choose to go solar?
Well, primarily because of my concern for the environment. You know, I'm very aware of climate change and you know, the human contribution to climate change, and you know, especially with my background. I have an all-electric home, so I use a lot more electricity than somebody who heats with gas. So there was a lot of opportunity there. And then in order to do that, it had to make a certain amount of economic sense. Since I'm retired, you know, I can't just invest in something that I'm not going to get a return. And so at the time, there was the availability of tax incentives that were pretty attractive. The formation of the solar co-op resulted in very competitive pricing offer to the members of the co-op. And in today's lending environment, we're able to borrow money to invest in something like this at a very low rate. And at the time, we were able to use a sale of SRECs to help offset the purchase. So all of that, the concern for the environment and the way the economics came together led me to say now is the time to jump on this.
Thank you. Cindy, why did you choose solar?
Well, in addition to what Jim said, well, obviously the solar co-op made it able to do that. And the 30% tax incentive was a good reason to join it. But also the issue with increasing the value of my home as a sort of an investment for the future. I think that was an issue that we thought about. And I am definitely very concerned about climate change. I think renewables are a way that I could personally take a stand and do something about that. I also have a solar generator, a small solar generator that I can use as a backup. That's separate from my solar installation, and I can talk about that a little bit later if anybody has questions about that. But I just thought it, it was really the right thing to do. And I eventually wanted to get an electric car, which I was able to get last year. And that's plugged into my solar array. So that means I'm not using gas in my electric car also.
I would like to remind everyone that, at any time throughout the presentation, feel free to drop a question in our question and answer slot. If you are watching live from Facebook, we will be watching the comment section. So if you comment with a question, we will do our best to answer it promptly. All right, Hank, what was your reason for going solar?
Well, very, very similar to Jim and Cindy. It was a concern for the environment. It was an investment for our home. It will be a few years yet till we see a return on that, but it seemed like a good outlay, that we were out of debt and we could install solar. We knew very little about it. We had done a little bit of research, but I was very uneasy because I didn't quite understand the whole thing and what was involved and what I should get, etc. So when I heard about the first meeting of the co-op, or maybe it was the second meeting, it was coming from people I really trusted and people that were progressive, such as Rod Ruddock and definitely with Shireen Hess, our county commissioners, and several other people. And so it gave me hope or a feeling that wherever they steered me, that they would steer me in the right direction. And it really helped a great deal. And I think we went to a meeting something like in November, and it took a few months to get the RFP out, and then we went live in June. So it was a pretty quick and painless process. And the tax incentives certainly helped. And I don't know, I guess you'll explain what tax incentive is out there now, if there is any, but I know that the previous administration was working to counter that, and you've done a lot of lobbying, so that's helped. And the tariffs that were imposed also raised the cost of this by the last administration. So hopefully we'll be able to reclaim this progressive progress, I guess you could say, compared to, as much of Europe has. And I just wanted to say, about a year and a half ago, I was in the Midwest, and I rented a car. It was a business trip, but I rented a car to go see some friends and drove through Iowa, countryside of Iowa and Minnesota, and was absolutely amazed, especially at Minnesota. Iowa, not so much, but Minnesota, the acres upon acres, the hundreds of acres that have solar panels in them that are powering who knows what, but all of this going off the grid and just saving all types of things, the environment and money and et cetera. So Pennsylvania's not there yet, so hopefully we can get there.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. So what? Okay. Oh, I was going to ask, what things came up in the process of getting solar that you hadn't really expected or came as a surprise to you?
But I am on REA, and so some of the issues may be unique versus someone who is on kind of like, would you put that slide back in the slideshow mode? Mm-hmm. Thank you. And one of the first questions that comes up for any solar installation is, what's the transformer size versus what's required for the size of the solar array? And that became an issue for me right out of the gate, because I was looking at a rather large array. But when we assessed the transformer size, it was only a 10 kVA transformer and I needed 25, but that was a potential several $1,000 impact to the project, and could have been a deal breaker. I wound up going to REA and discussing the issue with them and actually lobbying that the transformer was undersized for the current requirements, because I have an electric boiler for an in-floor heating system, and that required a lot from the grid, and the transformer was actually undersized for meeting the house. So REA actually replaced the transformer with the 25 kVA at their cost. But the key there was they determined that it wasn't big enough for my existing needs. And so they picked up that cost. If I needed it solely for the size of the solar array, they would have put that cost back on me. Another issue, potential issue that I know stymied some other people who wanted to do this with REA is REA required $1 million liability insurance policy. And I was fortunate because of the situation I have with a farm and a rental property and my automobile insurance, all with the same insurance company. I already had adequate liability insurance, but for other people that I've talked to who are interested in going this way, that caused them a lot of consternation in getting over that hump. I don't know if REA has changed that requirement, but that was a problem. The other thing that happened was because of the distance of the panels to the house and then from the house back out to the transformer, that's a pretty great length for the conductors, and we were getting too much voltage rise, and it was causing the panels to shut down. So for 2 or 3 months last summer, during peak solar production, what would have been, the sunnier it was, the more the microinverters shut down. There were a couple of solutions to that. One of them is the inverters ship with a default protocol for what voltage they start shutting down. Our installer worked with Enphase to modify that protocol to allow them to stay in service a little longer. But the big difference was REA, I approached them about how high a voltage they had on their system, that I thought it was inappropriately high. And they admitted that they're getting a high signal from Penelec, and they have to run higher during peak loads in the wintertime or peak loads in the summer. But in the shoulder months of spring and fall, they don't need the voltage that high, but they didn't want to go through the trouble of making changes to the transformer to adjust that voltage. Well, after that discussion, they went and they did lower the voltage out of the substation. And as soon as they did, all the panels started performing the way they were designed to. So that was a surprise, and that took a few months, and that cost a lot of money in lost solar generation during that period of time. That's it. Whoops.
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute there. Henry, would you like to comment on this, the inhibitions that REA has put on people's ability to get solar in the past?
Yeah, so I think REA should get some credit for they've been making some improvements and learning a lot about how to better accommodate solar on their local distribution grids. REA is a rural electric co-op, and at least before the 2 solar co-ops happened here, they didn't have a lot of direct experience with solar. There was a pretty small number of solar systems interconnected to their grid. So they've been learning a lot and have proved to be, willing to make some changes. So Jim referenced, they had been requiring anybody who gets solar to have $1 million liability insurance policy. And it's pretty uncommon these days. It vastly overestimates the risk that a properly installed solar system actually poses to the grid. So it's really actually Pennsylvania investor-owned utilities like Penelec are not allowed to require these kinds of insurance requirements because basically it's just a cost with no real benefits. So after some conversations with Chad Carrick, and we had some other Solar Co members talk with him, the president of REA, he agreed to lower that. So now they're only requiring you to have a $250,000 amount of coverage, which is something that a lot of homeowners might already have, or wouldn't be much more than they have at the moment. They'd also been charging a fairly high cost to interconnect your system. So whenever you go solar, your local utility has to approve and interconnect your system so it can interact with the grid, because there's always energy flowing back and forth between your solar system and the grid. And they, typically they charge a couple $100 to do this, but REA have been charging over $1,000. It looks like they've been lowering that as well. There's some funding they have available to help cover the cost of interconnection. So now they no longer have to have the person going solar, bear that cost. And that means that it's essentially, the result is it's more affordable for REA members to go solar now.
All right, thank you. I'd like to get back to the main question. Cindy, during your process of getting solar and having had solar now for a few years, what experiences have you had thus far that you weren't expecting?
Well, I didn't have to deal with the problems that Jim did with REA, but I did have one issue, which came as a surprise. Penelec made me upgrade some box out on the road up on a pole that I didn't even know I had. So I think I did the upgrade for the whole neighborhood, and I didn't fight it at the time, and I didn't fight it, but it was about $1,000 upgrade that I had to pay Penelec, and I possibly could have gone and complained and tried to not do that, but I just decided I wanted the solar installation and it had to be done. So that was a surprise that I didn't really expect. Other than that, the whole system was really explained well. The solar installer did education and answered any questions that I had. So there wasn't really much of a surprise other than that. But after having it on the house for a fairly long time now, it wasn't a surprise, but people need to be aware that when there's snow on the solar panels, and in some months you're going to have less production than when it's sunny and nice and beautiful outside. But that seems to average out over the year, and I've made much more solar energy. I've made much more kilowatts than I actually use. So that it does even out. So you don't get hit any one month for not producing as much as you need. But that's really it. Other than that, things were explained well. And well, I could say that Penelec's energy bill is really confusing, and it's not very user-friendly. So our solar installer actually came over to my house one day and sat down with me and explained the bill from Penelec. So that was sort of a learning curve. But other than that, it was good.
So it sounds like communication on the part of the solar installer itself is very important to this experience.
It was, and he was very good at answering questions.
All right, thank you. Hank, did you have any experiences with your solar that you weren't initially expecting when you started this process?
Well, yeah, I think I'm similar with Cindy. I'm with Penelec, and most of it was being educated from the start that I didn't understand. I never understood SRECs. I don't think I ever will. I know Henry's explained them to me, and our installer. But we have a smaller array. We have 32 panels, a 10-watt system. Kilowatt. What? I always mix those up anyway. But I just we actually signed our SRECs over to the installer, because over a 25-year period, it was not going to gain so much money. And we would probably sell the house before then, or maybe not be of earth in 25 years. I don't know. So we were able to save a great deal on the purchase, a good amount of money on the purchase price. So that was not known at first. Also, the idea of educating me as far as kilowatt hours and what we needed. We use an average over the year of 17 kilowatts a year, and the system they first proposed would have covered that. But the idea of having more, instead of a 20 panel system, we went for the 32 panel system. So that provides more electricity and pretty much the guarantee that we will never run out, or we will never have to pay for electricity. And so at the end of the year, what happened on our anniversary, when Penelec settled out, we were about, we pay about $10.50 a month to Penelec for them to manage the electricity in and out. And so after 6 months, we had to start paying again. So it gave us about 6 months of credit for that $10.50. So, and also we are a household of 2. And if we sell, this household could easily accommodate 4 or 5 people. And so we had to think about the value at that time, when we resold. The other thing that was, we had just gotten a new roof within a year before, a metal roof. And we thought, how perfect. It's totally exposed to the sun. It'll be wonderful. And it'll be perfect place to put the panels, until we realized that because of the different angles of the roof, and the loss, that it wouldn't create as much as if we had a ground array. So that was eye-opening to us, and it really helped a lot. Although it's also, like you said, the distance from the house. We're about, as you would see, it's about 50 feet from the house. Not the ideal location for side appeal, for appeal for the property. It's quite massive compared to our property, but because of the distance, it loses less electricity to go to the house. And there are pictures, I think, that Henry has that he'll show later about some of that, and the converter box that we have, et cetera. So a lot of learning curve things, not a lot of surprises. Our installer, I think we all had the same installer, was very good about explaining that and helping. And so there you go.
So again, the importance of that installer education, but then also it sounds like they presented you with a couple different opportunities for financing the panels. All right.
Yeah, they gave us different levels of different ways we could go about it. We did not finance. We had retired and gotten out of debt, so we didn't want to go back into debt. So we scrimped for a while, and then when we got that 30% tax credit nearly a year or 10 months later, it really helped a great deal.
Excellent. And this kind of goes with our next question, which is, how expensive was this experience for you? When do you think you will begin to, those of you who are financing this yourself, when do you expect to see a return on your investment? Jim, you can go ahead and start.
Okay. The way I've expressed it here is what it cost me after the tax credit, and there was a certain economy of scale. There was a discount because of how large the system was, and also taking into account what the value of the SREC sale. So in the end, it cost me a little over $28,000. And I'm expressing it here in the number of kilowatt hours per year. A typical home on gas might only use 8,000 to 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. So in my case, I had a huge usage and could justify something at this scale. And if you go to the next page, it has more on dollars and cents. I do want to point out, if people are looking at the cost, often it's expressed in the cost per kilowatt installed, and it might refer to the dollar spread over the sizing of the solar panels, but it really needs to be reflected in what the size of the inverters are. We all went with Richard. Richard oversizes the solar panels, so they have much more capacity than the micro inverters. But that also means there's times that the panels are able to generate, but they're saturated. They can't deliver anymore. So I think what's more relevant is how much solar power do you expect to get out of the panels over the course of a year? So that's why I expressed it like that. The numbers as they applied to me look like a payback of about 9 years. I chose, I didn't finance with the installer, but I chose to do an equity loan that's an interest-only loan. So my cash flow is only the interest on that loan. And in today's low-cost environment, that's not a lot of money. And then my savings are immediate. So right from day one, I'm putting money in my pocket. I'm carrying the debt there of the investment, but my cash flow is positive. And even doing it at that, it looks like I would have saved enough money over 9 years to pay off the investment. If I run the numbers for an amortized loan, it would have resulted in about the same thing. One thing that makes it challenging to get a return on investment when you're on REA is that REA has very low electricity rates. So at the start of this project, it was 8.3 cents per kilowatt hour. And I don't know what Penelec is, what you're getting offset with the net metering, but it's more than that. So I would expect that the Penelec customers are getting a much quicker return on their investment. And Henry can elaborate on this a little bit more, but something that other people would need to be aware of is that if you choose an alternate supplier, and many people who are interested in doing solar for the environment would have chosen an alternate supplier for their electricity, normally say for green energy. The amount that they're paying for access to that power is a lot higher than what it costs to do it yourself. But it also, that supplier isn't obligated to net meter for you. And that would totally kill the economics of doing this. So I think it's something for someone looking into this to be aware. And Henry, you want to add to that right now?
Henry, could you explain what an alternative supplier is?
Yeah, so because our electricity system in Pennsylvania was deregulated a number of years ago, it meant we split the company, the electric utilities like Penelec are only distribution utilities. They run the distribution grid, they deliver power to you, but it's separate companies who actually generate the energy. And that means that as a customer, you can shop for an alternative generation supplier. So most people do it through a website called PA Power Switch. You go there and you can see, I can get, these providers might charge a lower price than what I'm paying now, so I could save money. Or maybe there's some providers that offer, all renewable energy. But what Jim was pointing out, when you're on your default power, so you haven't selected an alternative supplier, you are eligible, by state law to have that net metered when you go solar. And that means when you overproduce in the summer, you produce extra energy that gets banked, and you can spend down those banked credits during the winter when you're not producing as much energy as you need. When you select an alternative supplier, that part of the bill that goes to the alternative supplier, some of them will let you net meter, most of them won't, but none of them are required to do it. And so the only way to really guarantee that you're going to get full net metering if you go solar is if you stay on or switch back to default power with your utility.
Okay, thank you, Henry, for elaborating on that. Cindy, how expensive was this project for you? And when do you expect to see a return on your investment?
I might add here that I did switch back to the default setting for Penelec when I went solar because of those same issues. Well, I also elected to sell my energy credits to the installer. So that was about a $4,000 check to me right away. I got a 30% tax credit, which was close to $10,000, which you can take off your taxes for 3 years. You can spread that out if you can't use it all the first year or the second year. And my electric bills were, I don't know, probably about $2,000 a year, so somewhere around $150 a month, or a little bit less or more, depending. So I figured it would take about 7 or 8 years for a turnaround. And keeping in mind that electric bills are probably going to be going up, so that would raise every year. And I have a 52 panel installation. So what they do is they look at if you're interested in getting solar panels, you should have a year's worth of electricity bills and see how many kilowatt hours you use in a year. And then they design your system to cover that amount. And then I had planned on getting an electric car, so they added a couple thousand kilowatt hours a year on top of what I used in the house. So I got a system that is about 14,000 kilowatt hours a year. And when the anniversary date came around, Penelec then settles with you for the amount that you've put into the grid in overage than what you actually used. So instead of giving me a check for that, they applied it to any kind of bills that I would have over the next year. And I was paying about $10 a month for this service fee, or I'm not sure exactly what it is. So for the next 6 or 7 months, I had a 0 electric bill because what I had made covered even that cost. So, and I project that that's probably what will happen every year because I do make a little bit more than I use. So I love it, and it's working great, and I probably will never pay an electric bill again for the life of my house.
All right, thank you, Cindy. Hank, what was your financial experience?
Yeah, similar. And I have, of the three of us, it sounds like I have the smallest system, so 32 panels, 10 kilowatt system. And again, it's good for the two of us, but it would also be good for a family of 4. I'll break it down my recollection was that the system, if we did not have the co-op, would have cost me, and Henry or anyone, if I'm way off on this, you can chime in, would have cost about $27,000 cash. More, of course, if we financed. However, with the co-op, it brought it down several $1,000s, and the system that we wanted was going to cost about $22,000. And that's us giving up the SRECs to the installer. And then with the tax credit we got, which was 30%, we got over $7,000 back. So the system in the end, at the time, cost us around $15,000, which I'm thinking we're going to get payback in or break even in about 9 years, maybe 8 to 10 years. I'm not doing all the fancy amortization and comparing how Penelec rates are going up and all that. I'm just not as concerned about that. But the idea that I don't have to pay, like Cindy mentioned, don't have to pay anything for electricity probably ever again. And we have 2 hybrid cars, and we have a 95% efficiency gas furnace, which is LP gas, which I understand they now have environmentally friendly LP gas, or or made with renewable resources, which we'll have to check out. So our footprint is pretty small, carbon footprint. So that's what's concerning. So in a quick answer to your question, I'm thinking 8 to 10 years, but it feels like it's paying off already.
You had talked about looking at this from the angle of someone who might sell their property. Whenever you sell your property, what would the arrangement be with the new family? Would they inherit your contract, like your SREC's contract with the installer? And would the cost of the panels be included in the cost of the house overall?
Well, it raises the property value. Now, they estimated it at raising my property value by $31,000. I don't think that's realistic considering the market right now in Indiana, but it all depends what the market will be when it's sold. The SRECs stay with the installer even if I resell the house. But if we resell, since we've paid off it in full at the start, then the array and everything else is the new owners. I assume there's some process in changing it over to the new owner, and if you stay with Penelec or whatever, there'll be a process there. But I checked that out pretty closely because I wanted to make sure that we weren't selling ourselves short. And I did check with 3 real estate agents, 2 of which are friends in the area and 1 outside the area. And they agree that solar panels in Indiana County is a benefit to a homeowner and resell and adds to the resale value. Whereas there are some communities where that's not the case, but it is such right now anyway in Indiana County. And the other thing I just wanted to say, going back to a couple other things, the 3 of us on this panel have different levels of understanding, and a couple have much greater expertise at this from a science and a math and all that standpoint. But I don't look into that. I deal with some other parts of my life that I might be expert in, but certainly not this. But the co-op was my expert. I trusted the co-op and the people involved, and the fact that this was a nonprofit agency. We see things on our Facebook feeds and other feeds all the time that I would not trust to click on. But these came from friends and a nonprofit organization and a lobbying organization. So this made me much more comfortable in not having to know all the details.
Molly, I might add also that just to clear up the SREC a little bit. So you get 1 SREC credit for each 1,000 kilowatt hours that you make a year. If you want to keep them, it's sort of like stocks. You'd have to watch the prices go up and down in different states. Like, for instance, Washington, D.C., an SREC credit is worth $400 a credit. In Pennsylvania, it's worth about $25 a credit, give or take. So, and that's dependent on the state laws. So you could keep your SREC credits and then see if you wanted to sell or buy or whatever, or sell. But and it sounds like Hank and Jim also decided to sell their SREC credits to the installer. So those are now out of our hands. He owns them, he deals them, whatever he wants to do with them.
Yeah, so if you're someone who has kept your SRECs, so then typically you'd contract with a broker, an SREC broker, a company that will actually do the work of selling them on the market as they're generated. And then if you sold your home, then that would be something you need to transfer. You need to make sure the new home buyer can, connect with your broker or pick their own broker. So they're now selling the SRECs. And yeah, go ahead.
I think going back to the surprises question is that with SRECs, and I'm glad to hear that my fellow panelists sold their or gave their SRECs to the installer, because I didn't know if that was a big mistake, but I trusted Richard, so I thought, okay, this sounds logical. But the thing is that SRECs, which I didn't know at the start, SRECs is different than banking your I thought we would make money or get money back or get credit by SRECs, but we still get it because we're producing more energy than we are using. So those are two different things.
Yeah. So one way to think about SRECs is they're separate from the energy you're generating. So the value of the energy you're generating, that's all happening on your electric bill. If you produce extra, you get credits, on your bill that you can spend down later in the year. SRECs are a totally separate thing. They're created by state law, and they're meant to represent like the environmental value of that solar. So something that the market right now does not currently price in. So they represent that additional value of solar that has that because it's a green energy source. And so the law that created our SREC market is called the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, and it is requiring electric companies to buy certain amounts of energy from alternative sources, including solar. And it's actually the target for solar is they need to get 0.5% of their energy from solar by May of this year, May of 2021. It had been increasing gradually. That target had been increasing gradually over, for the past several years, and it's going to just stop and plateau in this May. So unless the state legislature does something to set a higher, more ambitious goal for solar, we're going to see, our SREC values stay low or even possibly fall. So it is something that really is tied to state policy.
All right, thank you. Moving on to our next question. Why did you guys choose solar versus other potential energy sources like, wind or, whatever other options are available to you? So Jim, you can go ahead and start with that.
Yeah, well, the environmental benefit was the big driver to pursue this. And I had considered doing something like this a couple of years earlier and trying to struggle through looking at how to do this on my own. The cost just became prohibitive. So the solar co-op really allowed the cost to become acceptable. So there's the environmental benefit at a cost that I could afford. I had also looked as an alternative with an alternative supplier, as we talked about, where you get your energy provided by a green energy company. But when you look at that cost, they're only replacing the generation portion of your bill. They don't displace the equivalent of net metering. They don't replace the transmission distribution charges that are part of your electric company's bill. And so if you look at that, compare that to investing in these panels like we did, those costs from an alternative supplier are far more expensive to you. So this seemed to be the least cost way of achieving a zero emission, other than the manufacturing of it, zero emission way of producing electricity. And it's just been a great solution. And I can't give the co-op enough credit for that, because as Hank mentioned, the co-op led us through developing the spec. They had the spec, they helped us assess the different bidders, they created the competition, they held our hand, they educated us. For me, this would not have happened without the co-op.
Thank you. We are getting close on time, actually. So Cindy, in a few words, why did you choose solar over pursuing other potential energy sources, such as wind or the alternate electricity providers, et cetera?
Jim said it well. I would say the same as he did. So I don't really have a whole lot to add, other than the co-op did make it easy. We had gotten estimates to do a solar installation the year before and had been thinking about it and figuring out how we could do it. And then when the solar co-op came in, it was an easy choice.
Hank?
Yeah, same here. It was an investment in the environment as well as in our property. So I just ditto everything others than I have said previously.
Henry, are you aware of anything like the solar co-op for other energy sources, whether it be a biodigester or wind turbine?
I'm not, at least for homeowners, solar tends to be the most practical and popular renewable energy source because it works at that small scale. Wind tends to work best at much larger scales with, like big wind farms. And it's also something that, all of a sudden you have moving parts and that don't exist with solar. So there's more maintenance issues that you need to keep in mind. So there are other group solar programs called Solarize, that are like solar co-ops that are out there, but I haven't heard of anything that does this with anything other than solar.
Henry, would this be appropriate to just mention about community solar and where it stands and the benefits to those who don't want to invest so much all at one time?
Yeah, I can quickly cover that. So community solar is where you have a large array built out at some location, and then you can have lots of different energy users subscribe to a portion of it. Those people they pay a subscription fee, but they also get a reduction in their electric bill that should be more than the subscription fee. So they're able to save money. They're able to be effectively solar powered, even though they don't have to physically put the solar on their property. So it has a lot of benefits. It opens up solar to people who are renters, people who can't afford the upfront cost of solar or can't access financing, people who live in multifamily housing, people who have, shady roofs. So there's a lot of benefits to letting more people benefit from solar like that. We need to pass legislation in Pennsylvania to make that possible. It's currently effectively illegal to do community solar. That's something that we're working on in our capacity as an advocacy organization. And it's ongoing. We're waiting for a bill to be introduced this session and see what that bill looks like before we know how we'll work with it.
All right, thank you, Henry. So very briefly, could you maybe state why you would recommend solar to a friend?
I think we've already covered it. It's been a great environmental benefit and at a reasonable cost that can provide you a rate of return. But the concern would have to be the tax rebates are different today than they were when we did this. The SREC value is different. I don't know where the prices have gone for installing a solar system. So it's an individual decision, but I would definitely recommend people consider it.
And do either of our two panelists have anything to add to that?
Yes, just yes. If they can do it, it's the right choice.
Agreed.
These are some pictures of some of the panels that are available, but I'm going to end screen sharing mode for now. And one of our following questions was, what advice would you give to someone who is looking to adopt solar? Is there anything that you would caution them about, such as the experiences you guys had with REA or having to invest in updating transformers?
I'll put in, because we did with Penelec and Richard, our installer, we didn't have to worry at all about Penelec. Took care of the conversations and the permits and approvals, etc. So Penelec for us wasn't even part of the discussion.
Because my experience, our experience here has been only, well, Cindy's had other experience that was good too, has been with Groundhog Solar and Richard Flaren. And so when I talk to people who are interested, I referenced that specifically, that, you know, going with Groundhog Solar, here's what I experienced, and I trust the installer, and that he would give you good advice. I don't know what pricing he's offering today, but this is what he did for us. So then I go over the things that we talked about, the economics of it and the environmental benefit, and some of the issues that I ran into, because in some cases we're talking to people who had a farm and were putting a rather large installation.
I would recommend that people check their roof first. We happen to have a roof that had, I think, 45-year shingles on it, and we hadn't got them done too long ago. So I did have a roofer come and look, and he said your roof's in fine shape. And so we didn't have to do anything to our roof, but that is something that people should check. Just to realize that some months are going to be better than others. When you have snow on your panels, you're probably going to get a warning from we have a little app that you would get with our systems called Enlighten, and it'll send you a warning that your micro inverters aren't working. So don't panic, because all that means is probably that the snow's covered. But I immediately emailed our installer and said, what's this all about? And he said, just check it in the next day and make sure it's okay. And it comes back on just fine. But it will be an issue when the snow's covering your panels. So it's not anything to worry about. It'll come off. I mean, I guess you could clean them off, but I don't bother, because it's not that long that the snow stays on them. It comes off. Some can't do the solar and panels on their roof. You need to know, you need to have a south or a southeast facing roof to do a good roof installation. And I had that, luckily, and I guess Henry's going to show some pictures. Maybe you could do that now, Henry, of our panels.
Yeah, and I was going to add one thing to understand is that there's a lot of advice and checking up on your site before you have to give any money. You're not committed to as far as we've been experienced. And that Richard has been great ever since. We don't really contact him much, but he's there to help us at any time, like Cindy had mentioned.
Yeah, my advice would be, get multiple bids from different companies. Ask each one of them to boil their bid down into dollars per watt, so you can compare them apples to apples. And then make sure that some of those bids are from local or regional companies. There's a lot of national installers, and there's a lot in Pennsylvania, and often you'll get a better customer service experience from some of those local companies. And then finally, just beware of solar ads you see on Facebook, especially if they make really attractive sounding claims. There's a lot of misleading information out there.
Thank you, Henry. If it's all right, we'll proceed with our next question. Do you think most buildings in Indiana County should have solar? Is this something that you think that should be adopted at a larger scale in Indiana County?
I can say I would love to see it, but not all homes are going to be able to do it, because they don't have the right facing roof, or the slant's not right. So, I mean, certainly it would be a good thing for our environment if more people could do it. And I think also we should note that Indiana's solar co-op is just amazing, because we've had, I don't know if it's still true, but we had more solar installations than any other co-op in Pennsylvania at one point. But we did an amazing job in Indiana County.
Still number one. No one's beaten you yet.
We like to hear that. All right, our final question is, what hopes or concerns do you have for the solar industry? And this is something that you could probably speak best to, Henry.
Yeah, at least in Pennsylvania, it would be great to see a better SREC market. So more aggressive targets from the state for how much solar we should have here, which would turn into higher SREC values, which would mean existing solar owners would start to see a better return on investment, and then more people would be enticed into going solar because the economics would be a little better. That's probably my number one hope. But also there's still a lot of structural barriers to some people enjoying the benefits of solar. If you're not a homeowner, if you're low income, you're going to basically solar is off limits to you. And those are people who are paying a higher share of their electric bill on energy. And so they could stand to benefit a lot more from the energy savings that solar offers. So there needs to be more support to help lower income households benefit from solar energy.
Thank you. And before we proceed with our discussion Q&A, I'd like to thank Hank for his time today. He has to jump off the call.
Yeah, thank you very much. The only parting device or advice I'd give is just follow along with the Indiana Co-op. I'm not sure how you get reattached to them and how this happens with a new RFP, and that's mine up right there showing. But they'll help you through it. And if you can do it, do it. And I'm just thinking with the COVID relief that we're getting now coming up, what better way to spend it if you don't need to spend it on something else, but to reinvest in something business of local community. That's what we did with the last ones. So if you can, I advise it. So thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I have to go, but my power is running low and my charger is on the other side of the house.
All right. Thank you, Hank.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So as we move into our question and answer session, anyone who's currently watching, please feel free to drop some questions in the chat or on our comments section on Facebook. Henry, do you have any other fun facts about the solar co-op or about the solar industry that you'd like to share at this time?
Well, yeah, so I should say that the solar co-ops that we run here are basically time-limited programs. So once the members go solar, they effectively end. We do have a lot of resources on our website for individuals interested in going solar to help guide them through that process on a more individual basis. SolarUnitedNeighbors.org is our website. But I think it's not unlikely that we will be back launching another Indiana County solar co-op in the future, and that is basically a function of if there's more demand, if there's more people interested in it, we can help make that happen.
So what I'm hearing is that a third solar co-op is not impossible, that that is something that could happen in the future.
One question for Henry is, you will definitely keep us posted on when we should contact our representatives to make things happen in Harrisburg, right?
Absolutely, yeah. If you join Solar United Neighbors as a member, it's free to do that. We spend a lot of time educating and mobilizing grassroots solar supporters to fight for better solar policy, and we are just waiting for those bills to drop that would update our portfolio standard. It looks like they will be bipartisan bills so they will have a fighting chance in our legislature here.
The other thing is the tax credit was 30% when I got my installation. It went down to 26% this year, I believe, and maybe 24% next year.
Yeah, it was originally, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
No, that's all. Go ahead and explain it.
It was originally supposed to drop to 22% this year, but there was the two stimulus rounds ago, one of those bills extended it. So now it's 26% this year. It'll actually be 26% again next year in 2022, and then it'll start shrinking again. But of course, we know there's some kind of big climate legislation on the horizon from Washington. We don't know what it'll be, but it could very well include changing, upgrading that tax credit.
And that tax credit was huge. That's a huge incentive, and it really helps with the cost.
I am not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if I can encourage people who are still on to stay on and fill out our survey that we have at the end. I'm going to also drop a link to our Sustainable Summit page. I encourage everyone to join us on Monday. We are going to have a presentation on sustainability in relation to food networks, and that will be hosted by the Indiana County Conservation District. So you can access information about all of our webinars at the link that I just dropped in the chat. The link is sustainableindianacounty.org events summits. Thank you everyone for your time today. If you have any closing comments, feel free to share them.
Thank you, Molly, for organizing all this.
Yeah, thank you, Molly.
Thank you
Thank
guys for joining us. We appreciate your time and your willingness to share your experiences. All right. Thank you everyone who's watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.